Welcome to Telli Bear's Techy Tidbits, lovingly hosted by AI. Smell is one of our oldest senses, and somehow still one of science's biggest puzzles. Today, we're changing that, covering the biology of how you actually perceive scent, all the way to a brand new experiment using sound waves to make people smell things that simply weren't there.
It really is wild when you stop and think about it. Why exactly is it such a massive puzzle?
Well, despite literally centuries of scientific research, olfaction remains our absolute least understood sense. We still actually struggle to come up with a completely satisfying theory for how we can instantly tell a peach from an apricot just by taking a quick sniff.
Right, because it happens in just a fraction of a second, without us even trying. It's this beautifully complex mystery, and honestly, that's exactly what we get to explore together in this explainer today.
So, diving into Section 1, the biological hardware.
To crack this puzzle, we kind of need to zoom way in, deep inside the human nose, because this is the exact spot where the physical world meets your nervous system.
Exactly. Up deep in the nasal cavity, you've got this incredible array of millions of sensory neurons. But the real magic number for humans here is 350. See, our olfactory system relies on just about 350 functional odorant receptor genes to actually catch specific odor molecules floating around in the air.
Now, 350 sounds like a lot, right? Well, that is until you realize that our rodent friends, like mice, have roughly 1,000 functional receptors. Yeah, people often hear that stat and just assume humans have a terrible, super impoverished sense of smell. But here is the really wonderful truth about us. We completely compensate with remarkable brain processing power. Sure, we might have way fewer physical receptors, but our brain acts like a massive supercomputer that makes up the difference in real time. Which brings us to Section 2, how brains read scent.
Moving from the physical nose to that incredible processor we just mentioned, it turns out that smelling isn't just a simple one-to-one interaction. It's not like one molecule hits one receptor and suddenly, boom, you perceive a rose. No, it actually operates as what's called a combinatorial sense. Think of it more like playing a complex chord on a piano, rather than just pressing a single lonely key. A single odor actually activates many different receptors in a completely unique combination. And out of those 350 base receptors, your brain can somehow recognize millions of these complex chords, which unlocks this absolutely massive universe of unique scents for us.
So we have all this incredibly rich, sophisticated processing power for these sensory chords.
Right, but then we hit this hilarious roadblock in human evolution. Our spoken language is surprisingly limited. Scientists actually have an incredibly hard time getting subjects to describe smells accurately.
Oh, for sure. They have to rely on these standardized semantic lists filled with highly specific and honestly weird words like mousy or kippery.
Right, as the researchers themselves note, most people today would be totally baffled by the word kippery. Well, unless you happen to be an expert in smoked fish. It's like our noses are absolutely brilliant, but our words just can't keep up.
Let's move on to Section 3, connection to the brain.
Let's zoom out to the macro level for a second. We really want to focus on the orbitofrontal cortex. It's this crucial hub sitting right behind your eyes where your olfactory processing and your higher-level decision-making directly overlap.
It is truly awe-inspiring when you realize how deeply intertwined our ability to smell is with complex frontal lobe tasks. Clinical data actually shows that your performance on objective smell tests is directly linked to major executive functions. We're talking about things like verbal fluency, inhibitory control, and working memory and mental flexibility. It's wild to think the very same neural pathways you rely on for everyday self-control are heavily bound up with your ability to identify different scents.
Furthermore, smell has this direct VIP pass to your memory and emotions. Your olfactory pathways connect deeply with limbic structures, like the amygdala, and they entirely bypass the usual sensory filters that things like sight and hearing have to go through.
Which perfectly explains that crazy, intensely physical feeling you get. You know, when you catch a sudden whiff of an old perfume, or maybe a damp forest, and you were just instantly thrown completely back in time to a very specific, vivid memory.
All right, Section 4, the ultrasound smell experiment.
Okay, I want you to imagine something for a second. Imagine experiencing a vivid, distinct scent, like a roaring campfire or, say, straight-up garbage, when absolutely no odor molecules are actually present in the room. Can you smell without an odor? Well, thanks to some really fascinating emerging ultrasound technology, researchers are beginning to prove that, yeah, you actually can.
Now, this is the absolute frontier of modern science. And honestly, it sounds straight out of science fiction.
It really does. But to be perfectly honest and clear about the scale here, we have to ground that excitement a bit. They tested this on exactly 2 subjects. In fact, the researchers just used themselves.
Exactly. So throughout this explainer, we want to frame this as an exciting, highly preliminary first step. This is definitely not a finished, wide-scale conclusion. The science is incredibly real, but the scale is tiny. And honestly, that's what makes it so worth watching.
But the results for those 2 subjects were absolutely fascinating. By using something called transcranial focused ultrasound, which basically safely beams highly targeted sound waves deep into specific brain regions, they reliably produced 4 distinct sense sensations without any actual odor present. And the thing that just completely blows my mind is the precision. Shifting that tiny ultrasound beam by a mere 3.5 millimeters changed the perceived smell entirely.
Which leads us to Section 5, what this could mean.
So taking a step back here, what does this tiny proof-of-concept experiment actually mean for the future of understanding the human mind?
Well, because smell has that direct, unfiltered path to memory and emotion we talked about earlier, scientists are now exploring the theoretical idea of encoding information directly into scent, a concept they're calling smelling meaning.
And even though we are still in the very, very early theoretical stages, it represents a completely unique potential channel. Understanding this pathway gives us some really grounded hope that we could eventually unlock incredible new therapies for neurodegenerative diseases, or maybe even offer entirely non-invasive ways to interface with human memory.
If there's one thing you remember from this, let it be. Your sense of smell is not just ancient. It's a window into how your whole brain works, and science is only beginning to look through it. Thank you for listening to Telli Bear's Techy Tidbits. I hope you have a magical day. Stay curious, stay kind, stay safe.